Hi, everyone. My name is Tad Greig, and along with my colleague, Mr. Sean Desguin, we are the associate conductors of the North Pittsburgh Symphonic Band. And we are one of a few of the community type bands in the Pittsburgh area. And that term community spreads to our outer community, where all of our musicians come from. And we're excited about one of our community neighbors. We perform in the North Hills, but the area of Shaler is having a wonderful year this year, celebrating their 125th anniversary. We think that that is very cool, and so in the Shaler area, they're having multiple events and concerts and productions and so forth. And one of our members came to us and said that we had that they had a guest speaker that was really very interesting, and we wanted to take the opportunity to share this person with you through our lens with the North Pittsburgh Symphonic Band. And so I'm going to introduce to you our guest for today. So is Fiona J Mackenzi, and she is an author and very well known. She is chiming in around 10 o'clock in Scottish time, 10 p.m. So we're very appreciative for her staying up for us. But she's going to talk about somebody who has ties to Shaler, Margaret Fay Shaw. And Fiona is soon to have a book out, beginning of October, I believe, about her and about her life. And so we're going to get started here. First off, welcome, Fiona, back to Pittsburgh via the internet, the Zoom. Tell us first off a little bit about you.
Wel, fesgur mag é bhúla, ha se uachsachtálaigte a bhí annaigh in nach, agus ha mé dachas go bhí hulacala a hakamsa a chórsta gré bhúla. So that was probably the best way of introducing myself. I'm a Scottish Gaelic speaker and singer, as well as now being an author. And that was just me saying good evening to you and thank you for the opportunity to be with you. And I hope that you enjoy what I have for you. My name is Fiona J Mackenzi, and as Tad was saying, I'm a singer and an author. I have also been an independent researcher into Gaelic folklore for the last 30 years. And about 30 years ago, I was on a singing course in the Western Isles of Scotland, in the Outer Hebrides, on an island called South Uist, about which I knew quite a lot before I went. And I happened to buy the book Folk Songs and Folklore of South Uist by Margaret Fay Shaw. And that book instantly grasped me because of its fantastic exposition, if you like, of life in the Hebrides in the 1930s. Where Margaret had been living. Now, I mean, that's quite an unusual thing in itself, but even more unusual when you realise that Margaret was not from Scotland. She wasn't from the Hebrides, she wasn't from Scotland, she wasn't from the UK, but she was from Glenshaw, just outside Pittsburgh. And I was instantly enraptured by her life and her work, and her work and that of her husband, John Lorne Campbell, also a very eminent folklorist, have been the mainstay of my professional performing career for the last 30 years. And 10 years ago, I was given the opportunity to become the archivist for Margaret and John's archives, which are now housed in an island, a house called Canna House on an even smaller island in the Hebrides, on the island of Canna, which is about 3 hours off the mainland of Scotland. I knew the archives very well already, but I jumped at the chance to change both my life and that of my husband and that of our dogs and that of our family in general, and take off to live on this tiny little island for as long as the island wanted us and as long as we wanted to be on the island, and to have the fantastic job of curating these amazing archives of Gaelic music, Gaelic songs, stories, research over the course of 2 very eminent and long lifetimes. So that's where I went there in 2015, and we just came back to the mainland a couple of years ago. Now, during that time, I was able to delve into the archives in a way that nobody had ever done before. or had the opportunity to do. And I gathered all these pieces of everything. Margaret and her husband John collected everything, down to every single Christmas card, every luggage label, every receipt for every hotel from 1910 basically to 2004. So you can imagine that's a lot of stuff. Never mind diaries, manuscripts, everything. So I was piecing together all this ephemera, if you like, as well as studying the music and the song of the house. And I had always wanted to write a book, and decided that was going to be my project, which I couldn't do until I left Canada and had the headspace as well as the time. When you live in a tiny island, it's very difficult to do anything for yourself, because you're working 7 days a week, basically. When you're a small population of about 15 or 16, you have to do everything for yourselves. No cars on the island. There's no shops. There's nothing, basically. There's a small post office, tiny little post office, one small bed and breakfast with 3 rooms, and a community shop, which is served on an honesty basis. So very basic mainstays on there, maybe a few packets of spaghetti, a couple of tins of soup maybe, and you put the money in a box. So it's very basic living. And so we were there, and then we came back 2 years ago, and so I wrote this book, and it's a love letter from me to Margaret, because of the immense contribution that she has left us to a living landscape which no longer exists in Scotland, or I believe anywhere else really in the world. She was also a photographer as well as being a musician, and she has given us this incredible collection of photographs and film from the early 20th century, which doesn't exist anywhere else. But I digress into terms of how did she get to Scotland? Why did she leave? Why did she leave Pittsburgh? Her family came from Scotland in about 1790. They were steelmakers just outside Glasgow, and they emigrated with their families in 1790 and went to live just outside Pittsburgh. And they proceeded to make themselves very comfortable lifestyles of making steel. And so the whole family grew up round about Glenshaw. In fact, the house only left the family about 13 years ago, I think, finally. It actually left the family. So there are still very strong ties to the area. But she was orphaned very young. Her mother died when she was 6, and her father died when she was 11. So she was left to be brought up by her 4 sisters and her aunts. But she was a very difficult child, and she had no interest in anything but a piano, nothing at all. She taught herself to play the piano at the age of 6. It was the custom in the family that her older sisters got the music lessons. She didn't get the music lessons, so she had to teach herself, but she did. And she proceeded all the way through school. She went to Bryn Mawr School, Philadelphia, and didn't really have any passion for anything at all apart from her music. She was not an academic, and she kind of failed at everything else apart from her music. And she was very unsettled after her father and mother's deaths. And so in 1920, her family decided to send her back to the old country and to go to school in Scotland for a year in Helensburgh, which is a small seaside town just outside Glasgow. So at the age of 16, she set off on the New Amsterdam and sailed across the Atlantic on her own at the age of 16 in 1920, which, when you think about it, was quite a brave thing to do. She was, it was truly at the midst of the Spanish flu pandemic and just at the end of the First World War, and she came all this way on her own. And that's what she did. She spent a year in Scotland in Helensburgh, again, only interested in her music, in her piano. It was her career she wanted to do was to be a concert pianist. That's what she saw herself doing, and that's what was her drive at that time. So she studied piano, and it was in St Bride's at the school in Helensburgh. She first heard a Gaelic song being sung by the Victorian song collector Margaret Kennedy Fraser. And just before I came on the call, when I was chatting with Tad, he mentioned that you might be playing a piece, the Eriskay Love Lilt. Well, the Eriskay Love Lilt was one of the first songs which Margaret heard at school in Helensburgh, albeit it was sung, this one was she heard it sung in English, although it is traditionally a Gaelic song, and comes from the island of Eriskay, which is, again, is just a small island in the Hebrides. But Margaret's thing about when she heard these songs being sung at school was she instantly recognised that there was something not authentic about them. I mean, at her young age, how she was able to do that, we don't really know. But she just knew, much as she enjoyed them, they were performed in a very Victorian art style, but with big florid piano arrangements. But she instantly recognised that they weren't what she called the pristine form of song. And it was that night, the 2nd of December 1920, that she decided that the rest of her life would be spent trying to find that pristine form of song. And that's what she did with her life. That's basically what she did. She had to give up her plans of becoming a concert pianist after studying in New York, Paris, and London for 3 years, when she contracted rheumatoid arthritis and her hands became too sore and painful to be able to sustain a professional playing career. So she was in a deep depression for a couple of years until she decided what to do with her life. When somebody said to her, "What do you want to do with your life, Margaret?" In fact, it was her doctor in New York that said this. And she said, I want to go to Scotland and collect Gaelic song. And he said, "Right, that's what you should do. Just do it." So she did. And she came back to Scotland to live in 1929. And she tried all the islands, basically, till she found one that felt right, where she felt at home and which felt authentic. And she lit in South Uist, which is one of the larger of the Hebridean Islands. But it still only today has a population of about 2,000. And she lived there for almost 6 years, collecting song for the love of it. She wasn't doing it for any anthropological reason. With her good musical ear, she was able to transcribe Gaelic song in a way which had never been done before. Because she could hear the various very intricate Gaelic modal systems that there are, and songs out with the bar lines, etc. And everything, of course, was unaccompanied. It's not traditional at all in any way, shape, or form to sing a Gaelic song accompanied. So she was learning to speak the language, and she was learning a whole new way of presenting, of giving the people of the islands back their songs and taking their pictures at the same time round the fireside and fishing and cutting the peats and immersing herself in the community, if you like, which nobody had ever done before in the Hebrides. What was quite common was that people would come and they would stay for a few days and take pictures and make recordings, if they could make recordings at that time, and then disappear again. But she came to the islands and she stayed. And she immersed herself in the community. The people respected her for that. And that's what she did. And she has collected for posterity all these fantastic, beautiful, wonderful Gaelic songs, all written down manually, not recorded in any way, shape, or form using technology, which is quite an incredible feat. And while she was on South Uist, she met her husband, John, and they eventually bought Cana in 1938 and went to Cana and continued their collecting, their travelling. They went to, well, actually before that, they went to Nova Scotia in 1936, taking their car with them as one did, because they had an enormous Edison recording machine to take with them, which weighed a ton, and it's still in Canna House today. So they spent 6 months in Nova Scotia recording all the old Gaelic speakers and their songs in Nova Scotia. But not only Gaelic speakers, they also recorded Native American Indians singing their own song and speaking their own Mi'kmaq language. So in the sound archive, we have all these incredible recordings from 1936 as well. So that's a very potted history of how she came to be on Canna. And she was on Canna until she died in 2004 at the age of 101.
Wow. That is so fascinating, and what a life to come from the Pittsburgh area and then travel out there and end up loving it so much and making that her life's work. Can you talk a little bit more about her process of gathering the music, collecting it, and sharing it with others?
Well, Margaret's special, very extra special way of collecting song, and it is really something incredible, is that she was living in a tiny little glen of 12 houses, 12 families. She restricted her collecting to those 12 houses. She could have collected outside that area, but she restricted herself to that tiny little glen. And I'm talking about a glen which today, I mean, it's about, from end to end, it's about 500 meters, if that. It's a tiny glen. But from that tiny little glen, she collected all of these songs. She would just go and she would go into their houses. They're very rude houses, very, very plain croft houses, small farm houses, probably with a cow sticking its head through the door and chickens wandering around inside. And she would sit beside the fire and she would just listen to people. And she had books and books and books and books of manuscript books, and would just, while she was beginning to learn Gaelic, she could only take down little bits to start with. So there's a lot of just stave rather than any of the lyrics or anything, because she wasn't at that stage yet where she could understand what they were singing. But she would take the dots down, if you like, as best she could, and then whose ever house she was in would say, right, you'll do it again. And she could do this 10 times until she had the melodies down exactly as it was being sung to her, with all the grace notes and the bar lines and everything. A phenomenally difficult job to do. But nobody would let her off with it until she had it exactly right. And then later on, it came with the lyrics. Once she had started to acquire the language, they would say, no, you haven't quite got that right. You need to go back and you need to do that again. So that was basically her method. She just went everywhere with a little shoulder bag over her and her manuscript book and a pencil. And she would go in, they would have a cup of tea, in Gaelic, what we call a strúpach, which just means a snack. And she'd be welcome to the fire or, outside. If they were if they were singing working songs, perhaps outside, milking the cow, spinning, lots of work songs, obviously, churning songs, all these kind of things, reaping songs. And she would just take down what was around her, whatever she was hearing, and accompanying it with the photographs of these people singing those songs to her. So you have an incredible record of, not only do you have the piece of paper with the manuscript on it, but you've got the picture of that contributor at the same time to go with that piece of music, which is an amazing thing to leave behind for us.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I think I really like her approach to wanting the pure form of these folk songs. In bands or orchestras that we have some composer would say the restraints of that staff and the notation that we work with. And in finding more about her, I think about our composer, one of our prime composers, Percy Granger, who was such a great advocate for the folk song that rather than take this beautiful folk music and restrain it by our forms of musical notation. He went and did everything with standardized music notation and writing and conformed it as much as he could to the folk song. And I think that's why in that folk music, in his folk music especially, there's an endearing, there's a heart, there's more of a substance of a culture that you music when you play his as opposed to somebody else just kind of rewriting folk music. And it sounds very much like Margaret was in that similar ilk, the purity of the folk song.
When she was very young, I mean, even from a very young age, before her father died, both her father and mother were very keen that she be exposed to as many different types of music as they could possibly give her. And in her autobiography rather, which is called From the Alleghenies to the Hebrides, it's out of print now, but you can usually pick up copies on eBay. She does actually talk about Percy Grainger, interestingly, in the early chapters, and all the other music that she was being exposed to. So she had quite a wide range of music knowledge instilled in her, really, without her realizing it. And even from a tiny age, when she was 7 and 8, songs could bring her to tears. She didn't know why, but she had an instinctive feeling for emotion within a song, and would find herself in tears, for no particular reason. So I think her ears, obviously, her auditory awareness and everything, I think, was very important to her from when she was tiny as well. And everything that she writes about in her first couple of chapters in Alleghenies is all about the sounds that surrounded her. The sounds of the steam trains coming, screeching through the tunnel through the hill behind the house, and the ice cracking in the crick in the winter, and all this. It's all about sound, which is an amazing thing, really, from such a young age.
Okay, Sean, we're getting short on our Zoom time, but Sean, you have another question.
Yeah, I was curious, do you have a favorite or two that you'd share with us, and not to necessarily sing it for us, but maybe the text or something that really spoke to you in all of your studies with her?
In terms of song?
Yeah.
Well, the first song in her book from folk songs and folklore of South US is called O Mo Ruich, which means "Oh My Country," and it's an immigrant song. And it's a beautiful song. Just the singer is actually in Manitoba and is thinking back to their homeland, and it speaks very plainly. I think it spoke very plainly to her too, as an immigrant herself in Scotland. It made her feel homesick for North America, in a sense, I think, and that's why she placed it as number one. It's a very well known song here, and has been recorded many times. But I still think you can't beat the stripped back traditional versions. We have a very good website here. I don't know if you've heard of it. It's called Toper an Dúlchais in Gaelic, which basically means a kist of riches, kist of wealth, and it has all of the Cana recordings, which Margaret and John made over the course of their life, which is about 1,500 original recordings, and as well as other BBC recordings and School of Scottish Studies recordings. It's an enormous resource. If you haven't checked it out before, then check it out. That's where you'll hear the original stuff. The earliest recordings that we have available. And Margaret and John contributed to that enormously. But Omaguik, and obviously the Eriskay Lovelock, but sung in Gaelic as well. The pristine version rather than the Kennedy Fraser one.
Right.
Fantastic.
Yeah. A couple things. our tribute, North Pittsburgh's tribute, is we're going to do an arrangement of multiple Scottish tunes. It's entitled Scottish Rhapsody. It's arranged by Clare Grundman. Clare Grundman arranged so much music by orchestral composers, but a lot of his output was folk music. And he, in his Scottish Rhapsody, he, of course, Auld Lang Syne, Scotland the Brave, Bluebells of Scotland, and Irisque, Love Lilt, and the Cockle Gatherer are all compiled in this piece. And you and I are talking about how folk music just it churns the heart. It doesn't matter whether I am Scottish, but it doesn't matter whether you're Scottish or not. You know, there's something about folk music that is just very endearing. As we get down to the end of close to the end of our time, the book that is coming out here in October, its title?
The Cadence of a Song, The Life of Margaret Fay Shaw. That's her.
Awesome. Because we want to, and the archive that you shared with us, where we can go and find that music. If you'll put that in an email to me, we'll share that through our site, and we'll share too about the upcoming book.
That's our house in Glenshaw.
I'll be darned. Look at that.
Very cool.
There you go.
Wow. Well, Fiona, we have really enjoyed having the opportunity to meet you and find out so much more about you and your topic. Margaret, what an interesting life, and what an interesting life you lead. We wish you nothing but continued success, and we hope that if you get back over to our side of the pond, we'll have a chance to meet in person.
That would be fantastic. So thanks very much for giving me the opportunity. I've really enjoyed speaking to you. And if you have any more questions, then please, fire them over to me in email. I'm delighted to answer anything.
That will be great. Thanks so much. And hopefully the North Pittsburgh listeners, if you watch this, you'll be able to find out more about Fiona and about Margaret. And we can hopefully share some contact information if you want to delve more deeply into this wonderful person, this wonderful text, and more about the music, which is what we're all about. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Fiona.
Right.
Thank you, Va. Thank you, Va. Good night. Good
night. Come on.
Desguin,